Hello, my friends. It is June 26, 2025. I am Frank Vaughn. This is the Fulcrum, and we have a lot to discuss today. The good news is the ceasefire is holding, and it appears that Donald Trump has successfully navigated the neocons' attempt to get him involved in a protracted war in Iran, which is a good thing. But the threat remains. Now, I don't want to spend a whole pile of time today talking about Israel-Iran. We have other things to talk about. But this article comes so close to my own thinking. 5 reasons why Iran and Israel agreed to a ceasefire. This is by Andrew Koribko. Iran and Israel inflicted unacceptable damage to one another. Israel was taking casualties. Both sides want to portray the conflict as a victory. And both sides cannot entirely make that claim, and there's various reasons why. Israel did a lot of damage to Iran, but Iran also managed to nullify some of those Israeli defenses and proved that stockpiles to maintain those defenses are thin so that they're not 100% effective. And if the countermeasures run out, then ballistic missiles can rain down on Israel with abandon. These are things that were tested in the conflict, and it's one of the reasons why both had to back out at the same time. The Trump administration didn't want another major regional war. That seems to be proven now in light of Trump's comments, in light of announcing a ceasefire before either side, Iran or Israel, was ready to go forward with such. And outright criticism of Israel means that he successfully navigated the neocon trap trying to get him into a war. But the threat remains that the Americans could get drawn in at a later date, and we'll talk about that. Trump unexpectedly defied the Israeli lobby and the neocons. Very true. It does not mean that the threat has entirely passed. We are going into an uncertain future. The other 2 points on Koribko's list I don't necessarily agree with, but on the main points I do. Let's just talk about Israel tried to turn Iranian generals against the Ayatollah just before the bombs fell. The idea that there was going to be a spontaneous uprising in Iran that was going to take out the Ayatollahs did not materialize, and the Iranian regime likely emerges from this stronger, not weaker, because of the spontaneous outpouring of support for the regime in the streets of Tehran and other cities in Iran. And I think it will keep paying a dividend. Since the outbreak of the conflict with Israel, Iran has arrested dozens of people and executed several accused of spying for Israel. Earlier today, Iranian state media reported that 6 more people were arrested in the western Hamadan province for allegedly spying for Israel's Mossad. Mossad has come out and said they're not leaving Iran, and I would not expect them to. But each headline like this, each development like this, and each day that goes by without a spontaneous Iranian revolution is one day further into the strengthening process in the wake of this 12-day conflict. There are a couple issues that are going to change the litmus moving forward into the future and why I think the conflict is not over. The headline is, "Where is Iran's uranium? Top secret leaked U.S. intel says core nuclear components intact." Now, the administration and Hegseth have contradicted this, but European intelligence has also said that the uranium remains intact, and we are faced with evidence, which is cargo trucks lining up outside of Fordo. They were there moving something. And what do you think? If they were moving equipment and they were evacuating people, what would have been the highest priority thing that they would have grabbed and moved to a different location? Likely that enriched uranium. So even though Iran's nuclear program has been obliterated in terms of its facility, they still maintain control of a great big stockpile of enriched uranium, which could lead them to develop a nuclear bomb in the future. So this story is far from over. The other thing is the rocky political situation in Israel. As I've highlighted in previous video, the government of Benjamin Netanyahu has been in trouble for some time and on the verge of collapse, and was in danger of collapsing before the outbreak of hostilities. Now, who knows how hostilities and how the outcome of the Iran war, because I think Israel can make a better case that they won the war than Iran can, and I think it's easier to consume for the Israeli public than it is to consume the idea that Iran somehow won the war. I don't think Iran won at all, but I do believe they caused more damage to Israel than Israel expected. We're talking about billions of shekels in damage, and not to mention all the human casualties, which were aplenty. Witch hunt. Trump calls for cancellation of Netanyahu's corruption trial. In addition to his political problems, he also has this corruption trial, which you could view as an extension of those political problems. Now, I don't want to sell Netanyahu short. This man is a brilliant political operative and survivor. But with the Iran war on pause at the very least, and probably for some time, and the Gaza war winding down, and the fact that Iran couldn't even successfully call on Hezbollah, that's how weakened Hezbollah is, to do any sort of counterattack against the Israelis from the north. The situation, the warlike situation in the Middle East might actually be winding down for a period of time, which is going to deny Netanyahu some of his best political cover. So we'll stay tuned and keep an eye on Israeli politics. We may have a new prime minister. Moving on to some other big news here at home, domestically in Canada, more federal public servants feeling stressed and emotionally drained. Boo-hoo. It's so bad. The response rate for the survey was 50.5%, with 186,000 employees in 93 federal departments and agencies responding to the government survey. 23% of respondents reported high to very high levels of work-related stress in 2024, up from 19% in 2022. The survey found 35% of respondents said they always or often feel emotionally drained at the end of their workday, up from 28%. Is that the workday at home or at the office? But to their credit, we don't want to make too much fun, because they've had to put up with Justin Trudeau for 10 years. That's got to drain anybody. There are other wars going on in the world, and one of the most important ones, if you're a Canadian or even an American, is the Ukraine-Russian war, the Russo-Ukrainian war, which needs to end because it is nothing but senseless slaughter. Now, I made a short video. Actually, it was part of a longer video from months ago, but I edited it and re-released it as a short, and the YouTube algorithm is just nuking its ability to actually be seen by anybody. So we're going to embed it here and see how it goes. I need you to understand that when NATO talks about unending war in Ukraine, and it is NATO at this point that is pursuing warfare in Ukraine at any cost, and we know this. It's a matter of historical record that peace has been on the table multiple times, and NATO, not Russia, torpedoes the entire thing and pulls Zelensky along. We're paying for public service pensions in Ukraine. We're paying for weaponry in Ukraine. We're paying for corrupt government officials because they siphon off the money. We're sending armaments over to Ukraine. They're turning around and selling a portion of those armaments on the black market and pocketing the money. And then some of those arms are turning up in the Middle East to try and kill Western soldiers and operatives that are in the Middle East. This is what we're paying for. But watch this clip and keep this in mind every single time you see a yellow and blue flag, any single time you see a man in a suit or a woman in a dress in a political position talking about their undying support for Ukraine. Remember that you're supporting the megadeth of generations of men.
Thank you, Volodymyr, for hosting today's summit and for your courageous leadership as the duly elected democratic leader of this great nation. You've shown remarkable personal bravery, resilience, and resolve, a defiant spirit mirrored by the unbreakable Ukrainian people. You continue to inspire me and tens of millions of my fellow citizens back home in Canada.
And it will be conservatives who will continue to stand with the Ukrainian people now against the illegal, unjustifiable, and ego-driven bloodshed initiated by Vladimir Putin. We will stand up every day and every way in favor of the export of 83,000 CRV-7 missiles that the Ukrainian government has asked for. We also call on the government to keep its promise that thus far has been broken to deliver air defense systems, $400 million of which were announced on January 10, 2023. Putin has said he wants our Arctic. We know that once he defeats one country that he invades, he will move on to the next. His appetite for expansionism is insatiable. We stand with you now and always. Slava Ukraini.
Ну, это просто пипец. Что вы делаете? Вы не имеете права снимать. Я имею право. А вы имеете право вот так вот. Или руки поднимать. Имеете право.
Honestly, those scenes should disturb you to your core. And I've seen many people in the mainstream media space, in the social media space, signal their virtue about Ukraine unendingly. They sit behind their desks, behind their webcams, and they preach and wax poetic about the necessity of this war for geopolitical purposes to defeat the evil Russians who are on the march across Europe, as though the last 30 years hasn't seen a massive decline in Russian influence. I mean, it's just a matter of fact. This is what they support. And every single time they talk about their undying support for Ukraine, you should go to my YouTube channel, find the short clip. It's like a minute and a half, 2 minutes long, and you should send it to them and demand that they respond to what they see in that clip. Men being rounded up in the streets, sons and daughters, in a more limited way, but sons and daughters. As a parent of two beautiful children, it breaks my heart to think that I could go through the next decade to 2 decades raising them into good and humane people for my government to come along and grab them off the street, throw them in a van so they can go to some front line and get killed by a drone. It's heartless, it's disgusting, and it needs to stop. And now we got to shift the conversation to two of the greatest threats that in tandem, together, threaten Western civilization almost as much as the demographic problem, the fact that we stopped having babies. I mean, if you really care about the world, don't virtue signal about Ukraine or Israel or any other conflict. Go have a baby. That's really what you can do to save Western civilization. But I digress. People need, this is a tweet I made, people need to stop asking Grok for definitive answers. That is not what it does. This practice outsources critical thought and makes Grok the arbiter of your decisions and worldview, not you yourself. It's a dangerous habit and a trap. You see this all the time. At Grok, did Canada violate the terms of the USMCA? Let's dispense with that right away. Here is the chapter in the USMCA about corruption. And if you go through and take the time, which I've done in previous videos, and you read this chapter, you will very clearly understand that Canada has admittedly, at official levels, we had an inquiry on foreign interference in our elections. It's not just bribery, it's not just interference in elections, it's money laundering, it's drug trafficking, the cartel problem, internationally recognized, admitted by our RCMP. I'm not purveying fake news unless the government itself, this is a bit of a trap, is purveying fake news. In their official reports, they put out there that Canada is known for this. We have very clearly violated this chapter, which is where the punitive set of tariffs come from. Now, you can make a cohesive argument that the Americans have violated the USMCA too. And that might be a good argument. But we can't sit here and pretend we're the victims. We charge the Americans far more tariffs than they charge us. Our borders are far less patrolled than their borders. Our ports are wide open, and we're bringing in drug production material into this country, and it is being processed. Now, it looks like the government is trying to quietly break some of that up. Forget the fentanyl czar, even though you shouldn't forget the fentanyl czar. You should be asking where the hell he is and what's going on that front. It's all gone quiet, and I think the reason it's gone quiet is the fact that if it gets too noisy, people will start to realize that the government is officially complicit in the drug problem all around you, on your streets. The drug export problem, I always go back to the talking point, 84% of Australian methamphetamine comes from Canada. It's a really important point. Australia is on the other side of the world, and yet we're the principal supplier, and then people tell me we don't have a drug export problem. It's completely ridiculous. I think they need to clean it up. And I think they're absolutely trying to, which is why they're trying to invade your mail. They're trying to bust up all these cartel websites that operate with abandon. In my previous work, I've showed you websites where you can buy cocaine and ketamine and anything you want and have it delivered to your door securely by Canada Post. This is one of the reasons they're trying to get in your mail. There's other reasons too. But I think Donald Trump has brought this whole thing to a head, and Canada is actually going to try and deal with it. And we're talking about complicity on an international level, but honestly, you don't need much more than to look at the the push to decriminalize, hard drugs and to provide safe supply and all this stuff. This is a cover to hide the mass scale of corruption in Canada, this narco state that we live in, this mass scale of corruption, hide it in plain sight. And just in closing on this point, before I get back to the two things that I think are threatening our civilization more than anything else, not drugs. This is a segue. I tend to do that. We're just going to deal with the Conservative Party of BC, which, by the way, I usually don't play political advertising, which is basically what this is. I have my own problems with the Conservative Party of BC and John Rustad, but nonetheless, this is true.
In David Eby's BC, this is what shows up at a school event. Cards that look like health guides, but read like how-to manuals for hard drugs. These cards were handed out at an elementary school event in Nanaimo, BC, where kids walked away with cartoon-colored instructions on how to take meth, ecstasy, even GHB, the date rape drug. A parent complained. The school district apologized, but David Eby, he said nothing. Because under the NDP, normalizing hard drug use isn't a mistake. It's their policy.
Not a word of that was untrue. This is why my kids don't go to school. Even here in Saskatchewan, they're getting homeschooled here at home. My wife is taking care of that, and there's a separation between her efforts and my efforts here in the office. I cannot trust the public education system. I can't trust a country that is moving in this direction. Right here in Saskatchewan, good old conservative Saskatchewan, everybody thinks this is a redneck backwater. In fact, it's one of the nicest places you could ever live with some of the most brilliant people you'll ever meet. But the fact is, down in Regina, there's a big problem. There's a big progressive problem. There's a big socialist problem when it comes to trans ideation, trans ideology, or when it comes to perverse sexual material. It's been distributed in our public school. And this movement towards taking the onus of responsibility off the addict and trying to say that the real problem is we don't have enough safe supply and all this other stuff, this poison, this mental poison, this ideological poison is present here as well. If you're not disgusted by this as a parent, if you're not doing something about this as a parent, you really need to reassess your priorities. But back to the point, asking Grok what the truth is, which I think it's not just bad practice, it's a mortal sin. This is going to affect your kids far more than it's going to affect adults, but it's going to affect everybody if this practice gets entrenched. And I'm going to show you a bit of data that backs up what I'm saying, because it's like smartphones. Smartphones were unleashed on the world less than 20 years ago, folks. I think the first smartphone came on the market in 2011. They've only been around about 15 years. There was never any scientific studies done. There was never any knowledge. The experiment was just unleashed on the planet, and we're living it out in real time to see what the consequences are. And if you think I'm being hyperbolic, you have to understand that when technologies are unleashed on the human race without any prior knowledge, it does constitute an experiment. It's going to change how we function as a society. There was a world before TV and radio completely changed everything. Before the printing press, all of these technologies changed humanity fundamentally. But nothing has been more dangerous, potentially threatening, also potentially more useful, but the issue is usage habits are not indicating that the combination of the two greatest threats that I'm talking about, smartphones and AI, are being used responsibly by the majority of people. And this question, Grok, did Canada violate the terms of the USMCA, or any other form of question that is put directly to Grok as the arbiter of truth, is evidence of that. Every single time you see that, understand that that is evidence of the toxicity. Now, this was written specifically about AI. If we don't think, assess, judge, and discern while feeling a passion to do so, AI will ruin the average human's cognitive intelligence. Crazy how little engagement this gets. It's probably the most important point I've made since I started making video, because it's not just the ability to think, discern, and reason for yourself. You see, in the use of AI is a great tool. It's like Google search on steroids. The two things in tandem are fantastic for research purposes. But you have to be the arbiter of what reality is. You have to be the driver. You have to be the one asking questions to solve your own problems. When you go to AI and you say, is this true? You're doing it wrong because you're outsourcing problem solving. Grok will tell you that Canada has never violated the USMCA. I just showed you how they did. Multiple ways. And that's why you can't rely on it. It's a search engine. It's a tool. It's a language model. It's not a replacement for the truth, and it scares the bejesus out of me that Elon Musk's stated objective, which is probably shared by every other AI developer, is further AI to become the standard bearers of what truth actually is. That's scary, especially when it's combined with human laziness, which is what asking Grok to solve all your problems actually is. It's human laziness. Science has begun to demonstrate this. Social media, AI, and smartphones present a kill shot unless we step up how seriously we take ourselves. I don't even know if I've gotten into a TikTok deep dive, but the scatterbursting of the human mind by social media, the access to unrestricted access, so what, maybe unrestricted is the wrong word, unmitigated, uninterrupted, the addiction to smartphones. I've seen it in my life where people have not had smartphones until they got into their 30s and 40s, and now they can't put the damn things down. They're just scrolling all the time. Mindless scrolling. I have a discipline. I keep my smartphone very stupid. Very stupid. I use it for phone calls and some communication. If I have to, I'll use it to check on comments on YouTube. But when I find myself actually responding to things via my phone, I quit. I stop. I go to my desktop, I go to the office, and I do work in there. And then I try to keep as far away from this thing as I possibly can because I recognize it as, yes, it's a useful tool, but it's also a toxic instrument that will suck all of your time away. This is from MIT. The field of scientific research, when it comes to assessing the harms, the potential harms of the ill use of AI, it's a new field because it hasn't been around very long. We're only a couple years into this in earnest with everybody using it. I think we're really just at the start. We just hit the starting line and now we're off to a mad sprint because AI is built into everything. And this only happened recently in the last year or two. ChatGPT may be eroding critical thinking skills, according to a new MIT study. Now this is a preprint. This is the problem. When you run the gamut of trying to get your articles printed in journals, you have to run the gamut of established interest. And the question that remains to be answered is whether or not the purveyors and builders of artificial intelligence will allow or will oppose proper, thorough scientific research as to the effects of it. Does ChatGPT harm critical thinking abilities? A new study from researchers at MIT's Media Lab has returned some concerning results. The study divided 54 subjects aged 18 to 39 into 3 groups and asked them to write several SAT essays using OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google search engine, and nothing at all, respectively. Researchers used an EEG to record the writer's brain activity across 32 regions and found that of the 3 groups, ChatGPT users had the lowest brain engagement and consistently underperformed at neuro-linguistic and behavioral levels because you're not using your mind. You're answering questions, or you're asking questions, and then you're performing rote copy. There's no mental engagement there. So when you approach artificial intelligence, when you approach these tools, your brain needs to be engaged in asking questions and having a passion for asking those questions and wanting to derive your own answers using them as tools. If you do that, you're going to be in a superior position. There's no substitute for human intelligence, folks. You can't outsource knowledge. You can't outsource reason. You've got to do it yourself, and you've got to want to do it yourself. You should not want artificial intelligence to do the work for you. It should work with you. It should work with your work. It shouldn't replace those things. And that alone, we're going to find out if the science is thorough and it is allowed to actually happen. Because what often happens is once something becomes commonly used by everybody, people don't want the real answers. Or if they do get the real answers, they're kind of buried. Nobody wants to hear that Ozempic is a lifetime drug. You know what I mean? They just want the results. Nobody wants to hear about the side effects. Nobody wants to talk about, when it comes to trans ideology, for instance, nobody wants to read the consent forms and all of the ills that are highlighted by it. Everybody just wants to wave their pink and blue flag and pretend that everything's okay, and then bury the harms. Thousands of kids that are now adults who are maimed and are asking the question, why did my parents fail me? Why did society fail me? We ignore the damage and we just embrace the ideology. Is AI going to be like that? I don't know. I hope not, because it poses a very real threat of making the majority of people even dumber than they might already be. And the combination of smartphones and AI and social media, you have to get that in there together, present a huge cognitive challenge to the human race. Now, I mentioned that smartphones have been around for roughly 15 years. The relationship between addictions to smartphone usage and depression among adults, a cross-sectional study. This is just one of several that I'm going to show you very briefly. There's many more because we have sufficient time that we can look back and actually assess the damage that these devices have done to a certain cohort of society. How big that cohort is, we can still debate that. But undoubtedly, if you walk down the streets of Toronto and everybody's a hunchback of Notre Dame on their phones, they're not even looking where they're going anymore. They're not looking up in the sky anymore. They're completely disassociated. This is just one such study. The effects of smartphone addiction on learning, a meta-analysis. Just to make it simple, it's bad. Smartphone use, this is from January 23rd, just this year. Smartphone use leads to hallucinations, detachment from reality, aggression in teens as young as 13. Steve Jobs himself said, you should keep your kids away from the technology. He kept his kids away from the technology. I am doing the same. I'm teaching them, but it is very limited. I want them to use their minds. I want them to play outside. I want them to use their imaginations. Smartphone addiction and associated health outcomes in adult populations, a systemic review. Again, it's bad. If you sense in yourself an addiction to your phone, you need to train yourself to put it down and walk away. You have to resist this urge. Society has to resist this urge, and perhaps it is a losing battle, and I am speaking of things that I can't possibly stand in the way of. There is no replacement. If you're a human being and you believe in the value of the human race, which I think you do, if you decide to get up every single morning and live life in this world, even if all you do all day is complain about how horrible the world is, if you choose to still live and engage with this world, then you have a stake in the future of humanity. And this stuff collectively together, and I don't want to paint too dark a picture, because it does pose a very great opportunity for enhancing human understanding. These tools are powerful. I'm not here to say that we shouldn't be using them. I'm not even here saying that we shouldn't be developing them. But we should be putting just as much attention in developing the cognitive condition of the human experience. We have to teach people how to engage with this stuff, and then we have to figure out how to activate a passion to maintain that engagement. Putting you in the driver's seat, putting humans in the driver's seat, so that these tools are not replacements for the cognitive function of our mind and the intellectual processes that we go through, but in addition to, extensions of. Unfortunately, there's a whole pile of people who are treating these tools as replacements for the function of their mind. That's scary. And with that, we'll conclude this particular video. Thank you to all of you who subscribe and share and like and donate. You make it happen. Because we're not monetized, as has been pointed out to me multiple times, the algorithm is not going to help us. We're going to spread by word of mouth. We're going to spread because of your engagement. We're not going to spread because YouTube wants to help us or Twitter wants to help us. So it's kind of on you, and you should take, or give yourself, I should say, a bit of a pat on the back for the success we've enjoyed in growing to between Twitter and YouTube, 51 or 52,000 subscribers and followers as it is. We're doing good things here, and it's thanks to you. And if you appreciate this work, please consider continuing to support it via the website or in any other way that you can. I'm Frank Vaughn. I will see you in the next one.